Thank you, Senator Polley. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I just had to leave my office to come into the chamber to speak on this very important piece of legislation. Disappointing, actually, to leave the television where I was watching Four Corners, and it was former Senator Bob Brown and Christine Milne, other state MLCs in New South Wales and Greens, smashing Senator Wren on something terrible. But anyway, we're coming in on a more important issue, and only to find Senator Polley saying some crazy things over there. Senator Polley saying about penalty rates. Madam Acting Deputy President, it was the Labor Party in government that formed Fair Work Australia. In fact, they even appointed the commissioners. They set up the whole system. They appointed the review of the penalty rates. So they set up the umpire. The umpire makes a decision to shave some of those penalty rates on Sundays and public holidays, and we get the blame for it. Unbelievable. We get blamed for what they do. I mean, you're always right. Even when you're wrong, you're right. That's your system, Senator Cameron. And to go on and say, to blame the government. Senator Polley, Madam Acting Deputy President, talking about high regional unemployment. Quite amazing where I live.
Senator Polley, point of order.
Well, it is in the standing orders that you should refer to senators with their title.
I believe that Senator Williams had referred to senators. Well, I would remind Senator Williams, however, Senator Polley, I'll take you at your word, but I certainly did not hear him refer to anybody else but by their title. Senator Williams.
Yeah, I referred to Senator Polley. Does she have another title, Madam Acting Deputy President? If she does have, I'll be keen to learn about that. So Senator Polley takes to the point of order. Regional jobs. Quite amazing where I live. We're lucky to have Bindaree Beef, our local abattoir. We have plenty of young unemployed. Why don't they work at the abattoir? We're relying on Brazilian and Filipino visa workers to carry out the work. Why aren't the locals working there? Why aren't some of those locals working there? Would it be the fact that some don't want to work there at the abattoir? Some got a job there and when they rolled up they failed the grog test or the drug test? You only talk to many abattoirs owners who rely so much on backpackers, etc., coming here to do that work. I mean, we had this big debate about backpackers' tax. With 730,000 people unemployed in Australia, can't they pick fruit? Can't they help with the vintage in the grape season when the wine grapes are being picked? Can't they work in abattoirs? Can't they shear sheep? Unbelievable. But now back to this bill that's in front of us, and this is a very important amendment, Madam Acting Deputy President. Could I commend my good friend Adele Ferguson? My wife Nancy and I are very good friends with Adele and her husband Christian, their daughter Emma. Adele tipped me off months before she did the Four Corners story on 7/11. And what a disgusting situation it was. Youngsters out here on student visas. None of those visas, Madam Acting Deputy President, they could not work more than 20 hours a week. And so 7/11 franchisees employed them and they worked them for 40 hours a week, but at half pay. Instead of paying them to $17, $18, $19 an hour, whatever the rate was, perhaps more on a casual rate, they paid around $10 an hour in many cases. Then they said to those students, if you dob us in for underpaying you, we're going to go to the government and we're going to dob you in for working more than 20 hours a week and we'll have you kicked out of the country. What a good blackmailing system that was to use and abuse workers. I've said it 1,000 times, Madam Acting Deputy President, life is about fairness. People should be treated fairly and a fair day's work for fair day's pay. It's been around all my life, that saying. But congratulations to Adele Ferguson for highlighting the rorting that 7/11 carried out in many of their franchises to those workers, the absolute abuse to them. And then, of course, another very respected person in Australia, Mr Alan Fells, was appointed to be the, I can say, the adjudicator to clean his mess up. But it wasn't long there were millions and millions of dollars being paid by 7/11, and what did they do, Senator Smith? They sacked Alan Fells. I wonder why. because a decent man was doing the right thing. That's my suspicion. And so it goes on. Not only 7-Eleven, but Muffin Break, Gloria Jeans, Subway, Caltex, Domino's, Pizza Hut franchises. That's just some. Madam Acting Deputy President, I've said before in this place, when the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services that I'm part of, when we complete our whistleblowers inquiry and our inquiry into life insurance, I'd like to see that committee do an inquiry into franchises and the absolute abuse of those workers and what tactics they use to cheat workers. And why did 7-Eleven underpay their workers? Was it because the actual chiefs of 7-Eleven were not given a fair deal to their franchisees? Were they forced to actually cheat to try and stay afloat? These are questions we need to have answered, and I think a parliamentary inquiry by the PJC on corps and financial services could have a good look at that and perhaps find more answers to see if we need more amendments later on. The conduct by certain businesses is fuelled by inadequate penalties and ineffective laws, which fail to deter law-breaking and make worker exploitation difficult for the regulator, the Fair Work Ombudsman, to prove. Underpayment of workers is unfair for workers, but also for competing businesses who do the right thing and face higher costs because they are complying with the law. So if you've got another convenience store, you're not 7-Eleven, and you're paying the correct salary, the correct rate of pay to your employees, you've got certainly an unfair competitive advantage to those who are actually cheating the system. It is so wrong. When someone abuses their power, whether it's union bosses intimidating small businesses or dodgy employers exploiting vulnerable workers, the Turnbull government will take action. I'm pleased that is exactly what we're doing here now.
What about crooked farmers?
Crooked farmers? Yeah. Never heard of one.
No such thing. Not true.
Come in, spinner.
Senator Cameron saying, Madam Acting Deputy President, his interjection, what about crooked farmers? All the farmers I know have been the honest, hard-working people that do such a great job of not only feeding all of Australia, but millions of people around the world as well, and suffer some terrible, tough times. Lucky for good irrigation equipment and good pumps these days, they can do well. This bill will amend the Fair Work Act too, increase penalties by 10 times for serious contraventions of payment-related protections in the Fair Work Act, which will apply when contraventions are systemic and deliberate. The bill will also raise penalties for record-keeping requirements to make them consistent with penalties for underpayment of workers. The bill will outlaw cashback and other coercive behaviour by employers where employees may be paid correctly but then forced by their employer to repay part of their wages. How's that for a cheating system? Oh, the award's $20 an hour, we'll pay you $20 an hour, but here's the deal, you give us $8 an hour back for giving you a job. What a disgusting treatment. It'll hold franchisors and holding companies responsible for underpayments where they should have known about them but failed to take reasonable steps to prevent them, as in the case of 7-Eleven, and no doubt more to come out. The amendments will strengthen investigation of underpayments by giving the Fair Work Ombudsman effective evidence gathering power, similar to ASIC and the ACCC, and outlawing the provisions of false and misleading information and the hindering and obstruction of inspectors who carry out investigations into compliance with the Fair Work Act. Those powers will be welcomed by the Ombudsman and, as I said, similar to ASIC and the ACCC. Just to the point on building on a record of protecting vulnerable workers, the bill builds on steps already taken by the government to protect vulnerable workers, including establishing a migrant workers task force. I repeat that, establishing a migrant workers task force chaired by who? Professor Alan Fells, a man I've been privileged to meet on several occasions, a thoroughly decent, honest man in my opinion, and he'll do a good job of chairing that task force. To target employees who exploit migrant workers and continue to monitor the progress of 7-Eleven in rectifying workers' underpayments. And hopefully the compensation is going out to those workers, Madam Acting Deputy President, with interest on top. It will be boosting funding to the Fair Work Ombudsman by $20 million to ensure that the regulator has the resource to investigate and prosecute employers who exploit workers. Another good thing. No point having a good oversight cop on the beat without the funding for them to carry out their duties. They need to be resourced well. Establishing Task Force Cadena in June 2015 a joint task force between Australian Border Force and the Fair Work Ombudsman to target and disrupt criminals organising visa fraud, illegal work and exploitation of foreign workers. Also requiring a valid payslip as proof of paid work before a second working holiday visa will be granted to temporary migrant workers. The amendment outlawing payments to sponsors of foreign workers through making it a criminal offence for employers and visa applicants to solicit or receive a payment in return for visa sponsorships. That's a good thing to bring the heavies down on those people who wish to cheat in that way. And funding enforcement bodies to ensure that employers comply with their obligations as sponsors of skilled visa holders. Madam Acting Deputy President, as I said, the first person to bring this to the public arena was Adele Ferguson with her Four Corners story, and I commend her for her great work. It is simply wrong that employers use all sorts of bribes, threats or whatever to threaten workers for one reason or another and then underpay them, not pay them by the award. It is disgusting. I've named those companies that are no doubt under the spotlight, and when we get this inquiry going, I hope we do, that not only 7-Eleven, Muffin Break, Gloria Jeans, Subway, Caltex, Domino's and Pizza Hut franchises, and Madam Acting Deputy President, I bet you there are more. I bet you there are more people cheating because these students come here, especially the students, who have to work, who have to get a job, to try and make their way through tertiary studies. And we know what our education system here is like in Australia. One of our huge income earners for our nation is education. People coming here to get a top quality education. Our standards are tremendous, our reputation is great, pardon me, and many from overseas, whether it be India, Asia or wherever, like to come here because they can hang their hat on one thing that's extremely proud. I have got a degree from an Australian university. Of course, many of them come from very poor families, and when they come here, they work very, very hard, and they need to work hard to pay their way through university, to pay their accommodation, their meals, etc., and the cost of living, only to find that some of these franchisors are simply abusing them. So here's the amendments put forward in this legislation to make it a criminal activity, to set up a watchdog with Professor Alan Fells at the lead of that particular watchdog. As I said, a thoroughly decent man. To see these people are not cheated, they're treated with respect, they are paid the correct award wages, and they can get on with their life without having to be bribed, blackmailed or whatever into receiving pay that is simply unacceptable. And of course that is pay well below the award. We have an award system in this country. We have umpires that set those awards, as I said, the Australia Fair Work Ombudsman, who make various decisions. And of course when they make a decision that those opposite don't like, because those opposites set the whole system up, then they blame us on this side of the chamber. That's quite amazing. Blame us for their activities, for establishing the umpire. The umpire makes a decision. I mean, seen it all my life, Madam Acting Deputy President. I've said before, when the umpire was put in place to work on things such as the Shearing Award, when they gave a pay rise, we as graziers paid the pay rise, no questions asked. But of course, when they said you can use wide combs as an option, what did we have? We had strikes, we had fights, we had sheds black banned by the unions. Our shed, my brother Peter and I, we had our shed black banned because the umpire made a decision, but the Australian Workers' Union didn't like it. So this is typical. When the umpire makes a decision, if those opposite don't like it, let's cause havoc, let's cause strife, as we did in the shearing industry. Luckily, since then, we've never seen a dispute in the shearing industry. Hopefully this amendment, and I'm confident it will clean this mess up in Australia. And as I said, with the parliamentary inquiry into this by the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services, Madam Acting Deputy President, we'd have a good look over several months, 6 months, 8 months. There'll be no hurry. Once the workload's off, we know how stressed the committees are for work at the moment. Let's look at the terms of reference. Let's have another look at the franchisors and the franchisees, how they behave, what pressure they're under. Is it the franchisors causing the pressure, That's one of the arguments under 7-Eleven. Small profit margins, the small business battling to keep their head above water to survive financially. Look at the franchisees and their behaviour. Look at the compensation, how it's working. Be very good to have Alan Fells in front of the committee and ask Mr Fells some questions about how he carried out his duties at 7-Eleven, where he was going with it, and why did they kick him out. That's the question I'd like to have answers, because he was brought in, as I said, the man commands enormous respect in Australia, doing the right thing, serving out millions of dollars of compensation, rightfully so, to those foreign workers who were cheated, blackmailed, bribed or whatever, only to find that next thing Alan Fells is booted from his position as the independent umpire making judgments on those compensation packages. I look forward to the ride ahead, and so if we can see more wrongdoings in the franchise industry, hopefully the committee inquiry will bring that out, and if necessary, come back into the chamber here and make more amendments if we can find it out. That's what committees are there for, to find out what's wrong, to see the current laws, to recommend to the government, say, hey, this needs changing, this is something you've overlooked, and to hear those witnesses come forward. I hope we get some of those young workers, students, many of them from India. We see them out there, they're great workers, in the service stations, in the 7-Eleven stores, etc. Let's hear from them, let's hear their side of the story, and let's see what else we can find out, to see what else has to be done to see that employers, franchisors, franchisees treat their workers properly. I've been fortunate in my life, Madam Acting Deputy President, I've been an employer and an employee. I've worked as an employee as a truck driver, in small business, air mist, agricultural spraying, and as a shearer, of course. I've also been an employer in business and on the farm, so I have a good understanding of both sides, and as I said, people should be treated fairly, should be paid at least the award, should be looked after, and a fair day's work for a fair day's pay.